to welcome everybody here today, this morning. It is Monday, May 11th, and this is the first of, looks like 8 or 9 webinars we'll be having for our Financial Leadership Academy pastors, and we're inviting some of our alumni also too from the Academy for Church Finances and the FLA sessions 1 and 2. So welcome, Reverend Bill Brown. We are very fortunate to have you here today. And tell us something about yourself, Bill. Bill is director of New Faith Expressions, but I'll ask him to think about something that people don't know about Bill.
Something people don't know about me. My first paying public speaking gig was very similar to Zoom without the camera. Most people may not know that while I was in college, I was a dance DJ and on-air personality for 2 radio stations, one outside of Pittsburgh and one in Aberdeen, Maryland.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yes.
Remember the call signs of either one?
The station outside of Pittsburgh was WSAJ 91.1, and the Aberdeen station was WAMD AM 970, the voice of Harford County.
I love it. That is awesome. Well, great. Well, thank you. Welcome here today. And let me start with a quick prayer. Karen Walker, unfortunately, is doing a funeral this morning. So if you don't mind, a lady will preach to, we'll do a little prayer. So Lord, please make this time special for us. Help this wisdom coming through you, through Bill, to us today to help brighten us and enrich us and help us to, help out our churches in the community. Lord, just we pray that we're here and are going to be receptive to this message and understand what's coming through and help us to utilize it to help your kingdom. In Christ's name we pray, amen. And without further ado, there's a poll going on right now too. So I'm going to share the poll. I'm ending the polling. Looks like about 59% said yes, their church did receive federal PPP. Another 15% are waiting on it, hoping the second wave, and 26 did not apply. And then, does your church have an actively promoted permanent endowment for the future Christians at your church? And this is one of the things that we think that every church should have these. 33% say that they do, 4% say they're in the process of, 63% say that they need it. So that's where we are. So thank you guys so much today. Wanted to share the results for you. There we are right there. And without further ado, Reverend Bill Brown, thank you for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Annabelle, you may have accidentally stopped your video. So if you're still listening in, try looking to start your video. Well, good morning. I am Bill Brown, the director of New Faith Expressions for the Baltimore Washington Conference. As we get started, I am just shared a link to you all in the chat feature for a Dropbox. There's a couple of handouts in the Dropbox that if you're able to use your computers, click on that. There are 3 handouts that I will refer to, but they're not mission critical, that if you can't get to them right now but can get to them later, that would be great. I'll refer to some of them, but they're things that you'll be able to work on your own after my presentation. So today, let's get started a little bit. And lovely to see my desktop. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see that this morning. So when the COVID-19 hit, about 8 weeks ago, a lot of churches started New Faith Expressions by moving their services from the in-person reality to the virtual reality. And my hope is that as some are talking about returning to in-person worship, that you would not neglect thinking about ways to do New Faith Expressions in your particular context. And today I just want to walk you through what a New Faith Expression is and how we go about getting those started in our local churches and in our local communities. But to start, I wanted to just go over a little reality check that is pre-COVID-19, but I believe will continue way beyond. If you look at our current context, now this is a reality check for all churches in the U.S. We know from Stats from Exponential, which measures all churches, not just the United Methodist Church. 70% of Protestant churches in the U.S. are in decline. 20% are growing, and by growing, I mean they've added at least one more person than they lost each year. About 10% of churches are replicating, and by replicating, I mean they are growing by adding multiple sites or locations or campuses. They're multiplying themselves. And then 0% are multiplying, which is rapid growth. So you can see most of us are probably in the same boat of decline, but if we look a little closer at the reality check, some additional statistics in that. Among all denominations, 6,000 to 10,000 churches close each year. That, again, doesn't take into account the effect that COVID-19 will have on this, but BC, what I call before COVID, 6,000 to 10,000 churches were closing each year. There's a growing number of people who reject religious affiliation. In 1992, about 6% of our population in the U.S. Was rejecting any kind of religious affiliation, and by 2014, that number increased to 22%. But if you look among millennials who are young adults today, about 35% of that generation reject religious affiliation. Now, if we look a little closer at our own denomination, now these statistics I want to share don't take into account yet COVID-19, and of course won't take into account the postponed General Conference that will take place in 2021. But according to GBHEM, by 2020, 30% of United Methodist churches will be closed. From 2014 to 2015, in 1 year, the United Methodist Church lost over 82,000 people, according to GCFNA. That is people who left the United Methodist Church physically by going to another church or going to no church. Also people who left the United Methodist Church by death. In 2015, 40% of United Methodist congregations had fewer than 35 people in worship. Just curious, you can answer this in your chat. What is your average attendance in the local church to which you are affiliated? Either is everyone clergy on this in this webinar, Frank?
Yes.
So the church that you serve. Take a moment to answer that. I see it in the Q&A. We've got some answers coming in. Just pop those into the to that chat. I'm answering one of the questions. Reverend Dr. Hayden asking if these slides will be available. Unfortunately, they will not. This is an ongoing seminar that I teach, Reverend Hayden. So you might want to take some copious notes, or you can talk to me after. So looking at the numbers that are coming in, some of you are right at that average. Many of you are above that average. Let's go back, look at some of the statistics. There we go. The number of adults who belong to a church dropped 20% over the last 2 decades, with the largest drop occurring in the 18 to 29-year-olds. And congregations most likely to grow are the 10% with more than 250 people in worship. So what we're seeing is our larger churches are getting larger and our smaller churches are getting smaller, and that middle group of churches of the 150 to 250-ish range are being lost. They're either getting larger or they are getting smaller. Let me move some things around on my own screen so I can see stuff coming in. Now, the reality is we know things are changing, and they are changing in rapid form due to the coronavirus. We know the world has changed. I don't think it will ever go back to what people would consider normal. I don't even like to use the word the new normal. I like to use the phrase the new reality, because particularly over the next couple of years, it's going to continually shift. And that's something that we can try to be prepared for, or at least plan for. But in addition, just to the last 8 weeks, life in the church in the U.S. has changed a lot over the last 60 years. Even if you look at the span of all civic organizations, participation has been in decline over the last several decades, from the church to other civic organizations, like the PTA, Lions Club, Rotary Club. Those kinds of activities have been in decline. And I believe that one of the problems of our decline is our inability to adapt to the context that we're in. Now, many still look back. You might have people in your own local church who do this. They look back to the heyday of Methodism, when they remember when their churches were all full, and they thought, all we had to do then was put out a new sign or put up a creative statement. People would come pouring in, or we could talk about how great our pastor was or how great our programming is, and people would show up. And that's just not the case anymore. People are not just showing up just because we've opened our door. So before we get into any other conversation, we really need to have a starting point of why. So often we focus on two things. We focus on, who do you want to reach? We look at the people in our community and we think, if we could just get this group, if we could just get families with children, if we could just get more youth, if we could get more young adults, or we talk about how are we going to reach this particular group of people? What programs will we offer? What new studies? What type of worship will attract them? But when we start with the who or the how, we often miss the why. Why do we want to reach people? And if you don't know your why, then nothing else really matters. I want you to take a look at what I mean by that.
Next thing they say is what? How do I know what? But the key really isn't to know what. The key is to know why. Because when you know your why, you have options on what your what can be. For instance, my why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. My what is stand-up comedy. My what is writing books. My what can be going out with some friends to eat. In fact, another what that has moved me towards my why is a web series that we have out now called Break Time. So every Wednesday at 3 o'clock, you should subscribe to the channel. We do a series called Break Time on YouTube. So 3 o'clock, we drop a new episode. One episode in particular, I'm about to show you a clip to. We were in Winston-Salem. So break time, this is how it works. I travel the country, I do stand-up comedy, probably an hour, hour and a half at an event. And in the middle of my show, I'll just sit down and start talking to the audience. And funny just happens. Or I'll meet somebody who's really interesting. So I met this one guy, and he said that he teaches music at a school. I was like, all right, you teach music, can you sing? And then I'm just gonna show you the clip. Check it. So you're a musical director. Cool.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Go ahead.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Wow. That bro could sing, you know what I'm saying? All right. Now, what you give me the version is if your uncle just got out of jail, you got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick, if you know which version I'm talking about. Just see if that exists. Let me see what you got.
Amazing grace. that saved a wretch like me. I see.
So here's the thing. The first time I asked him to sing, he knew what he was doing. The second time I asked him to sing, he knew why he was doing it. When you know your why, your what has more impact because you're walking in or towards your purpose. This is called how.
I think that's good to reiterate. He knew how to sing. And the first time showed us he could do it. And I think we know how to do church. We know what we're doing. But in the second instance, he knew why he was doing it. So I think you have to ask yourself, are we singing our heart song because we have to, or because we have a story to tell? I would add, if you're more interested in just keeping your doors open, or if you're more interested in generating more money by reaching more people, or if you're just looking for more members, then that's the wrong reason. Just drop into the chat this morning if you can, in one sentence, describe your why. For me, as I go about my work as director of New Faith Expressions, my why is out of a love for Jesus, and it's always been about connecting people to God and to other people. And most particularly, connecting with those who are the most disconnected from faith and most disconnected from a faith community. So anyone else, just drop your why in the chat box, and I would suggest that you take a moment to read those as well. So as we're thinking about gathering new faces into new spaces, what I'm really talking about is being a sent church versus being an attractional church. And being a sent church means existing with no expectations that those you're reaching out to will ever gather on a Sunday morning in your worship space when you return to your worship space. This is about having no expectation that they will ever fill out a pledge card, no expectation that they will ever serve in leadership within your church. It's not about growing your church. It's not about year-end statistics. This is really about the kingdom of God and reaching more people for Jesus and making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. And so when you think about a new faith expression really exists to reach people who are not yet a part of our churches. I like to say a new faith expression exists to bring the church Jesus loves closer to the people Jesus loves. So let's just talk for a moment about what is a new faith expression. A new faith expression, here's the technical term. This was adapted from a 2004 report out of the Church of England when they began looking at a missional church movement, and then what eventually turned into the UK's Fresh Expression movement. But it's a new community of faith that's in tune with our changing culture, that is developed with those who are not yet a part of church in mind. And so, as I said earlier, we've moved a lot of our services from the in-person world to the virtual world, and a lot of people are thinking, wow, we've got these new faith expressions, these fresh expressions. However, as I've been looking at the services that have been posted, not just from our conference, but from around the connection, a lot of the services I'm looking at are still designed with those who are still a part of a church. And that's wonderful, and that needs to continue, and that needs to be done. But when you're thinking about a new faith expression, they're really targeting, really looking at, really geared towards those who are not yet a part of church. In other words, they're new gatherings or they're new networks that engage those who aren't currently a part of a church. And I say there are 4 key components to being considered a new faith expression. New faith expressions gather new people, they meet regularly, they relate to a United Methodist entity, and they form disciples. Let's take a little deeper dive into what that means. So new faith expression does not merely bring together already church people in a new way. By design, it aims to give unchurched and de-churched people a fresh experience of Christian community. So without new people, it's not a new faith expression. So it could be the most creative idea that you have, but if it's targeting people who are already part of the church, that's wonderful. That's just not a new faith expression. New faith expressions meet regularly. Regularly could be weekly. It could be monthly. It could be in between. It could meet regularly online, as a lot of you are doing. But a one-time outreach, even if it's a one-time outreach every year, is not a new faith expression. This is about building community, and community is built best when you spend time together. So ideally, it's weekly. And that's just how you build communities, by regularly doing life together. In our context, new faith expressions relate to a United Methodist entity. Our hope is that it's going to break the mold of typical forms of church. But every new place should have a supportive connection to a local church or a campus ministry or some other United Methodist entity. And that's not, the point isn't to funnel new people into the local church or the current entity. The idea is for the current entity, the institution, to support the new faith expression. One of the ways I've described it is when my wife and I decided to have children, we did not decide to have children so that we would be taken care of or that there would be this new income stream for my wife and I. We decided to have children to pass on something to another generation. And that's what we're talking about with new faith expressions. It's not to generate people or an income stream for the current. It's to pass on our faith to something new. And new faith expressions form disciples. Now, some places will focus on Bible study, other will focus on service or music or liturgy. That's going to vary depending on your context, but without discipleship, it's not a new faith expression. So we're going to have a little quiz this morning. Yay. Based on our definition and on our key components, I'm going to give you some examples of expressions, and in the chat you can answer yes or no as to whether or not you think this is a new faith expression. A new worship service to alleviate crowding at an existing service. Go ahead, type in yes or no. Is that a new faith expression? Oh, one's even offering me an explanation. It is an expansion. All right, those have come in pretty quickly. You're correct. No, it is not a new faith expression. I think it's wonderful if you're crowded that you start a new worship service. That's wonderful. Go for it. But that just doesn't fall within the context of a new faith expression. How about meeting monthly at a local restaurant to talk about faith? Yes or no? New faith expression? All right, we get some varied answer in there. A lot of yes, a couple of no's, some maybe. So if you answered maybe, you are correct. It could be a new faith expression. It depends on who's gathering. So if over 40% of the gathered people are church folks, then it is not a new faith expression. So if it's a gathering of people at a local restaurant to talk about faith, are people who don't go to church or are not a part of a church, then yes. If 40% or more are part of a church, then no, it's not a new faith expression. How about this one? Leading a devotion. Oh, I can't see it myself. Here we go. Leading a devotional and prayer with your dance group at the end of every rehearsal for those who want to stay. Yes or no, new faith expression? It's not a dance ministry group. It is your local dance group that you rehearse with offsite. You're a part of, to answer one person's question. So actually, this is a new faith expression. It's a true story from another conference in our connection. It took about 30 days, but the person who started the devotional and prayer with the dance group was a part of the group and then just started offering devotions and prayer at the end of their rehearsal for anyone who wanted to participate. And those who were participating were people who were not yet a part of any church. How about a gathering of moms of preschoolers together at the park for a weekly play date and a time to talk and encourage one another? Yes or no? Some of you are catching on. Yes, possibly, Bruce Jones. Depends on if there's a faith component. So again, this is a yes, but again, you're correct. It depends on who is participating. Are they currently associated with the church? And is there a faith discipleship component? And last but not least, or no, not last but not least, adding a new young adult Sunday school class. Yes or no? Okay, I think we're getting bored with our quiz, but we're going to give one more. And it is not a new faith expression, but finally, last but not least, you're meeting at IHOP when you can meet at IHOP on Thursday mornings with a group of men from church. Correct. If it's the same people just in a new location, it is not a new faith expression. It could easily pivot to become a new faith expression, depending on who these men are inviting to join them, and if they are specifically inviting those who are not a part of a church, and that this is a way to introduce people to the Christian community, then it could be. But more often than not, that no, this is not a new faith expression. So what does it take for us to become a church then that exists for those who don't yet know Christ? What's it going to take for us to move beyond our four walls? And I think it starts by looking in the mirror and answering the question, what shapes your church? I believe every single church is shaped by something. It's where, and by shaped, I mean this is where you pour your attention, your money, your resources, your people. And so your church could be shaped by worship. Your church could be shaped by a particular ministry, that whether it's children, youth, a music ministry, it's just shaped by a ministry. I think a number of our churches are shaped by the preferences of our current members. And to really become a church that exists for those who are not yet a part of church. We have to move beyond any of these shaping activities, whether it's worship or a particular ministry, and mostly if it's members' preferences, we have to move beyond that and think to ourselves, what if our church was shaped by the mission of making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world? What if that is how we decided what we would do? What if that is how we decided our resources and our time? That's based on Matthew 28, verses 18 to 20 is the first shaping verse. Jesus came near and spoke to them. I've received all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you. Look, I myself will be with you every day until the end of this present age. Now, that phrase, go, isn't an imperative. A more literal translation is, as you are going, make disciples. So as you're going through your everyday life, so whenever you go to the grocery store or the gym or the knitting circle or the ball game or a Rotary Club, wherever you may find yourself, you are called to make disciples. And that shift in thinking should change your view of discipleship, that it's not about gathering at the church for disciple making, but wherever we find ourselves with people, we could be making disciples. A second scripture that forms a mission-shaped church is Matthew 22, verses 35 through 40. And one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest? He said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment, and a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So as you are going, keep in mind that our great commandment is to love God and love others. And that forms us as a mission-shaped church. That helps define us as being a sent church versus an attractional church. And it's wrestling with, as a congregation, are you willing to move from being an attractional church to being a sent church? And by that I mean, if you look at the last several decades, churches have operated from the mentality of build it and they will come. Whatever it is. Perhaps it is a new building. Maybe it is a new worship service. It could be the best coffee or the latest program. And we have spent countless hours and resources trying to attract people to our churches and have them come to us. And I think one of the, if you can say, a positive out of all of the COVID-19, it's getting us to begin to think beyond our church buildings and attracting people to our church buildings. So instead of this come to us mentality, what if we embraced a new approach of go to them? And that's what's embodied in Jesus' command in Matthew 28:19. Go therefore and make disciples. As you go, make disciples. So here's the difference. In an attractional church and a sent church, an attractional church looks at the church as place. I mean, how often have you said to yourself, I'm going to church? A sent church looks at church as gathered community. Now, I know a lot of us are looking forward to gathering again as community in person, but you can still have gathered community virtually, but it's that gathered community versus being a place. The attractional church emphasizes that people will come to us, come to church. A sent church focuses on the church going to the people. Attractional church looks to host quality events, and I don't minimize quality events. Everything we do should be quality, but the focus is on quality events. Ascent Church focuses on people developing faith as a lifestyle. I think the phrase that summarizes both for the attractional churches, I go to church. I know I catch myself saying that often. I'm sure you do as well. The Ascent Church looks at it differently to say, I am the church. So wherever I am, the church goes with me. Now, particularly as we're out of our buildings, as we're preparing to reopen, and as we're preparing to be sent churches, we want to be looking for things called third places. Now, these third places are going to probably open sooner than our churches, so it's a good time to begin looking for those in our community. Let me give you a quick definition. A first place is our home. It's where we live, where we sleep, where we relate to family. Currently, it's where we work. Currently, it's where we are doing everything. So our first places are very familiar to us after 8 weeks. There's kind of a blurred line. Usually work is a second place. That's where you go to earn your livelihood and interact with coworkers. I think most of our second place has been Zoom lately. But a third place are those places that you choose to hang out, relax, and enjoy time. These are the places where people in your community gather. Can anybody, off the top of your head, you just drop it in the chat, can anybody name a third place that you're familiar with? These are places people choose to hang out and relax. And think of when we could gather. Coffee shops, Dunkin' Donuts, gyms, Starbucks, online. Some people are calling online as the new fourth place. Golf courses. Parks, libraries, you all are getting it. So Starbucks is probably the most famous third place. They actually set out as their mission to become a third place. And that's why when you go into a Starbucks, you'll see comfortable furniture arranged in conversational settings. You'll find free Wi-Fi, but there is some changes that Starbucks has been seeing that pre-COVID-19 and particularly because of COVID-19, but their in-store sales have been dropping over the last several years, and their carry-out and drive-through sales have been increasing. So you will notice that new Starbucks are not being built without drive-throughs. So even as they see a decline in the third place gatherings, they're pivoting and shifting so that they can still maintain their bottom line. So an exercise that you can do, it's in the Dropbox. I shared the link at the beginning of the chat. There's a people mapping exercise handout. And if you look at that on your own, you'll see that in the center is the church and there's a bunch of circles that are surrounding the church. And I just invite you to think about your own local church and fill in the circles for all of the potential third places that are around your church and name them. If it's a particular pub, if it's a particular restaurant or park or gym, just name it, and then look through all of those names and think to yourself, where do I frequent? Where are the third places that I'm already beginning to develop relationships with people who are there? And also begin to ask yourself, is there a place to which God is calling you to frequent? So to get to the heart of what we're looking at doing, let me go through that. I just described that. So how do we gather? How do we gather? Here is that link again for the handouts. How do we gather new faces into new spaces? How do we bring the church Jesus loves closer to the people Jesus loves? And we do this by going out to bless our community. And bless, I like acronyms, so bless is an acronym. Help you to remember. to begin to create new spaces for new faces. You begin by listening. You love and serve your neighbor. Engage in community building. You seek discipleship together. And eventually you shape the faith community. So more than anything else, rather than telling you a particular what or what to do, in terms of, well, if you just start this program or you just start this kind of gathering, I want you to begin to be equipped for how to do it. So when you've developed your why, you can move into your how. That will shape your what. So you begin by listening, you love and serve your neighbors, you engage in community building, you seek discipleship together, you shape the faith community. Let's look at those a little more detail. To begin by listening, first and foremost, before you decide what your community needs, stop and listen to God. And then listen to your community. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of listening. So often the church begins by deciding, well, we think people in we think this is what people in our community need, but sometimes we offer that in a vacuum. And I do see your question, Kendall, and we'll get to that. Hold on to that till the end. That's a good question. But stop and listen to God. Spend time, gather a group of people together around you and be intentional about focusing on listening from the very beginning. And by listening to God, I mean, spend time together in prayer. Study scripture together. Check in with one another and ask, has anybody heard something from God? What are people hearing from God? Compare notes around that. A scripture that I like to focus on is Matthew chapter 9, verses 36 through chapter 10, verse 1. I like it from the Message. I'm not going to put it up on the screen. Just listen to it for a second. And it's talking about Jesus. When Jesus looked out over the crowds, his heart broke. So confused and aimless they were, like sheep with no shepherd. What a huge harvest, he said to his disciples. How few workers. On your knees and pray for harvest hands. That's where chapter 9 ends, and how often we may have felt the same. We look out at the people in our community, we see all of the people that are around our churches, and we think, wow, how many people, but we just have so few workers. And Jesus was looking at the same thing, and he said to his disciples, on your knees and pray for harvest hands. And then verse 1 of chapter 10 picks up and says, the prayer was no sooner prayed than it was answered. So they prayed for harvest hands, and then harvest hands were given. And the harvest hands that Jesus started with were the 12 disciples. So don't think you need to have a whole lot of people in order to reach new people in your communities. Start with who you have and who have a passion for reaching new people. So listen to God first, and then listen to your community. You can even begin doing this now. You can listen to your community in good, socially distanced, approved ways. Prayer walks are a wonderful way to listen to your community. In the Dropbox is a guide for doing a prayer walk in your community. And a prayer walk has 3 key components, of course. It's praying. It's walking around the community, around your church, praying for people in your community, praying for God to reveal the people who you see in the community that you may not see in your local church, and you want to observe what you see, and you want to encounter people. Let's keep 6 feet away, but you can still encounter and talk to people and begin to develop relationships, and relationships developed on prayer. In prayer is a great way to begin to do those relationships. And then begin to ask the question, who is our neighbor? Who is in our community that we don't see in our local churches? And a good online resource that the conference offers is Mission Insight. If you've never used that, it's a demographic compilation service that will break down the people in your community by age, household, education, income. And I always wondered to myself, how could they be accurate about the people in my community? And last summer, I met the president of Mission Insight, and I asked him that question, how can you be so accurate? And he reminded me that they purchase their demographic information from a company called Experian. And you may know the name Experian as the credit monitoring source. And in addition to monitoring your credit, they also monitor your purchase. So every time, I'll pick on Bruce Jones since he answered a lot in our chat this morning. Every time Bruce Jones goes to the Starbucks and swipes his credit card, Experian knows it's Bruce Jones. They know how old Bruce Jones is. They know what Bruce Jones is buying. And so they begin to develop a profile that people in Bruce Jones's demographic like to buy X, Y, Z, and they morph that into a larger demographic, and so they're pretty accurate. Then in addition to what Mission Insight offers, they offer a module by Tom Bandy called Mosaics that just breaks down the people in your community and what they think about faith and how you can begin to think about reaching them. You also want to ask the question, who will do this with us? Who can be your partner in this work in your community? I was talking with one pastor who is in Florida, and they began hosting Bible studies for people in the community in a Moe's Southwest Grill in their community. And over time, the owner of that franchise and several other franchises began watching and then participating and liked what they were doing, and then just made them the offer. If you want to start Bible studies in any of my franchise locations around this area, feel free to do so. So just by beginning to partner with people in their community, they were able to multiply their reach into several Moe's Southwest Grills. So as you listen, also begin to love and serve your neighbors. We live in a culture where, as Albert Outler put it, the world hears the gospel when it sees it, when its witnesses are clearly committed to a more fully human future in this world and the next. People want to see your faith in action more than they want to hear about your faith. So by loving and serving our neighbors, we begin to show them our faith in action. So I always like to start with the question, if your church vanished, would anyone notice? And by anyone, I know people within your church would notice, but would people in your community notice if your church vanished? And there's two ways to think about loving and serving your neighbors. One are what I call missional gestures. Now, a missional gesture is when your congregation provides resources for people or to other organizations who serve those in need. It's when your congregation does things like providing backpacks for children, or canned goods for food pantries, or weekend sandwiches for children, clean socks for the homeless, angel tree gifts, turkey dinners for those in need on Thanksgiving. Those are wonderful things to do. They're very generous. I say continue doing them, but those are what I call missional gestures. They're needed resources, but we don't get personally involved with them. We just hand them over so that our hands don't get dirty. So in addition to the missional gestures, if you really want to love and serve your neighbors, I suggest you begin to get involved in ministries of engagement. And some of your missional gestures, you may be able to pivot into a ministry of engagement. And a ministry of engagement is when you actually interact with those receiving the services. You get to know people, you understand their circumstances, you build relationships with them, you be present to them, you are Christ in their midst. The examples I like to use are from my last local church appointment at Wesley Freedom. a number of years ago, probably about 15 plus years ago. Oh my goodness, no, it's more like 20 plus years ago. They started a ministry called Feed My Sheep, which offered a free hot meal on 2 days a week. It increased to 3 days a week for anyone in the community who wanted something to eat. They didn't have to have any income requirements. It's just for people who like to eat. And what's wonderful about that particular ministry is instead of just serving, they also serve and sit down and eat with the guests and develop relationships with the guests and celebrate milestones with the guests and cry with them when they are going through challenges and difficulties. In recent years, about 8 or 9 years ago, the church started a food pantry, and once a month they set up a food pantry and they give away between 7,000 and 10,000 pounds of groceries. But instead of pre-packaging the groceries and just handing out packages of groceries, they set up a little grocery store, and so people can come in, they walk through the aisles, so to speak, of the grocery store, and they get to pick out what they like and what they want, and they don't have to take things that they know their family won't eat, and those who are serving get to have conversations, they get to interact, and it becomes community. And if we really want to show our neighbors that we love them, we want to develop community and friendships with them. And you can start that now. If you can't serve people one-on-one, perhaps you can begin to set up some Facebook pages or Facebook groups where you can get to know the needs within your community. I was talking with one church in another conference, and they set up a community Facebook page for their little development and just began to ask what they needed and developed relationships with their neighbors in that way. And then you want to engage in community building. So we begin by listening, we love and serve our neighbors, then we engage in community building. And community building is all about developing relationships. Christian author Leonard Sweet reminds us that the story of Christianity did not take shape behind pulpits or on altars or in books. The story of Christianity takes shape around tables as people face one another as equals, telling stories, sharing memories, enjoying food with one another. So the idea of sharing life together in community, that's central to Jesus' ministry. So engaging to develop relationships. There's 3 characteristics of relationships. They're organic, they're authentic, and they are reliable. Let's look at that a little deeper. Organic relationships can't be forced. Millennials and Gen Z, they want intentional organic spaces to gather, and they want to know that they're cared for, that somebody cares about them. And they don't want the relationship forced upon them. They want it to develop naturally. And even though we are connecting through technology, people still want to build those face-to-face relationships that are life-giving, that help lift them up, that help build them up, which requires an investment of time. Organic relationships just don't happen overnight. Authentic relationships, you need to be genuine. Start from a place of seeing all people as persons created in the image of God. Be honest with people, be sincere that you really want to be in a relationship with them, that you're not trying to just get something from them. Care about people. They want to be known. They want to know that we care. Be true to who you are. So as you're in community listening, as you're learning from people, don't compromise who you are as a congregation. You need to know who you are, what you like to do, and who you could do that with, and how you can intentionally share your faith. So as you think about what you like to do and the people in your community you can do that with, how can you take those opportunities as you're developing relationships to share your faith in some small way to begin with, even if it's let me pray for you about that, or offer some kind of devotion time together as you have built up that relationships. People are also looking for reliable relationships. You have to be consistent. It takes time, involvement, effort, and energy. We know that you have to invite somebody at least 7 times before they attend an event. And so being consistent about inviting and offering things. People appreciate those who offer love in consistent ways. They know that they can count on you. And then you want to seek discipleship together. I'm going to quickly put up, I know, Frank, we're running low on time, but as we look at discipleship, we have a particular Wesleyan discipleship to witness to Jesus Christ in the world and to follow his teaching through acts of compassion, justice, worship, and devotion under the guidance of the Holy Spirit. Hopefully that's not something that's new to you. Okay, so we have a good picture of Wesleyan discipleship. I had to look up. We have, hopefully some of you have seen this. You drop in the chat if you've seen this. Just let me know yes. That as United Methodists, we have works of mercy, works of piety. We have acts of compassion, acts of justice, acts of devotion, acts of worship. Some of these are personal, some of these are public. And when we put it all together, this is the discipleship that we are looking for as followers of Jesus Christ, melding together how we do acts of compassion and devotions personally, how we do them corporately. And what we're really trying to do is teach people to be disciples of Jesus Christ, and this gives us a great model for how to do that. And really how we make disciples, it's I want to say it's simple, but it's difficult because it takes time, but a method that I've tried to use, sometimes successfully, sometimes not so successfully, is you just pick a particular discipleship activity. So let's say it's an act of compassion and it's visiting somebody in the hospital, and you want to teach somebody how to do this. So you take them with you and you do, and they watch, and then you talk about it. And then the next time you take them to the hospital, you do the visit, they help you with parts of the visit, and then you debrief and talk about it afterwards. And then the next time you take them to visit, you watch them do it. They do the visit, you help them, but then again, you talk about it. And then you take them on another visit, they conduct the visit, you watch them, but again, you talk about it. And then they show somebody else. And you can do that with each aspect of discipleship. If you want to teach somebody how to pray, you do it, you let them watch, but the most important is you talk about it. You pray, you let them take part and help, then you talk about it. They pray, you help them, then you talk about it. It's just that pattern over and over again, and you can apply that to so many different aspects of life in the church together. And then you begin to shape the faith community. As you're looking at returning to your buildings, yes, Lillian, that is the way Jesus taught the disciples. So to wrap up, there are really just a few things that are needed to shape a faith community. As you're bringing together people and you want to launch it into a new faith community, a new faith expression, a fresh expression, you need this understanding of an up component. Up is how are you going to worship God together? Doesn't have to look like it's always looked, just how are you going to worship God together? There needs to be a component of in. How will this community do discipleship and fellowship within that community? You need a component of out. How are you going to offer loving service to the world through mission, ministry, and evangelism? And then it's also finally a component of realizing and recognizing that you're a part of something bigger. You're a part of this universal church. You're a part of this United Methodist Church. And I think if the COVID-19 has taught us anything, it has taught us that the connection is strong and we're stronger together than any of us are alone. And so you can even begin to look at your own local church and everything that you're doing, and you can categorize it. If I only need to do these 4 things, so what are we doing to worship God? What are we doing for this inn of discipleship and fellowship? How are we looking out in loving service to our community? And how are we recognizing that we are a part of this universal church? In close, I just want you to imagine, we're so used to people coming to church. We're used to people sitting in church. We're used to people leaving the church. Imagine what it would look like if we began going to people, engaging with them, and connecting with them. I mean, what would it look like if there were more new people in more places and more people engaged with Jesus' love? Thank you for this opportunity, Frank.
That's awesome. Thank you.
I know there's some questions that have come in.
That's what Bill, and I'm going to ask one right now too. So I know you talked about Feed My Sheep. I know you're probably working with a bunch of different churches right now. Can you give us an example of one you think is developing into one of these good new faith expressions?
We have a young adult in our annual conference who decided to put off their commissioning couple years ago in the local church as a provisional elder, because they wanted to begin to develop community within their apartment complex. They were noticing that neighbors didn't know each other. So she began making soup and hosting soup dinners within her apartment. And people actually came, and they conduct a worship service all weaving through this meal together. That blossomed into, you may all have heard of Coop's Soup. She now prepares and sells her soup, which then underwrites part of this ministry. And it's just a vastly different way of beginning to develop community. Rather than starting with a worship service in a building, she started with a soup dinner in her apartment.
That's awesome.
And I also know some other churches that are then pivoting things that they're currently doing. We have one congregation in the Greater Washington District that's had a free community meal every Tuesday for a number of years. And just this year, in September, they began to pivot that, and they began offering a worship service at the end of the meal for those who wanted to stay. They didn't want to do a bait and switch that, you thought you were coming for this free meal. We're really going to trick you into staying for worship. They let people stay, and at first only a handful of people stayed, but over time that began to grow, and about 50% of those who were staying were children.
Wow.
And so a whole new worship service blossomed out of a community meal that they had been hosting for a number of years.
That's great. That's awesome.
And I think, as we've had time away from our buildings, we should have time to think about how we can do things differently now.
That's great. Great. Well, Bill, thank you so much today. We really appreciate your time and effort. I know Annabelle's on here too, and we just appreciate what your own ministry is and how it's morphed and how it's helping others. So,
can we answer some of the questions that came in?
Sure. Go for it, Annabelle. You got any questions coming up?
Sure. So we need to be super quick, but
Okay.
Selena had a question. Pastors spend so much time and energy on church. How do we find time to mix and mingle and join groups where unchurched people are?
That is a great question, Selena. I did it. So before joining conference staff, I was the senior pastor of a large church. And in 2012, I started a new exercise regiment. I started running, and I joined a local running group that I am very involved in. And I would say about 75 to 80% of the people that I run with do not attend church at all. And they know what I do. They call me the running Rev. And I just took something I was already doing and joined a group to be a part of that and then live out my faith in the midst of that group. But it's also, Selena, you don't have to do it alone. You have some wonderful lay people, I'm sure, at your church who are already involved in community groups where there are unchurched people. So begin to equip them to be a part of this movement, and they can be the ones who are mingling and joining groups, and it doesn't all have to be on you.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. And then Phil Ayers says, I agree with everything you're saying. However, we have been told by Episcopal leaders that the gathered church is only in a building. The issue of sacrament being a prime example of this thinking. In this sense, some new faith expressions cannot function as the gathered community. How can we address this concern?
That is a good question, Phil. And some of this is going to be up to post-COVID-19, AC after COVID-19. I have not heard, and I may have missed it, I have not heard our current Episcopal leaders say that the gathered church is only in a building. But when you connect your new faith expression to a United Methodist entity, there are ways to do the sacraments. It's how we were founded, Phil. We had circuit riders who were only in local churches once every quarter, and so that's when they did sacraments. So if there is no clergy, someone would come in occasionally and offer the sacraments. And we were at our strongest when we let the lay people, when the clergy only did those things that the clergy could do, sacraments and the ordering of the life of the church, and then we let the laity do everything else.
That's great. Good. Annabelle, good?
I think we're good. Yes, thank you.
All right. Bill, I want to thank you again. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
B Brown, first initial, last name, at bwcumc.org. It's also on the conference website.
Awesome.
And I will share with everybody through our email and through our Facebook pages and on our website, FLA page. We'll have this copy of this recording. We'll have the Dropbox information that Bill has shared, and obviously we'll put Bill's contact information in there.
Perfect. Perfect.
Great. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, FLA participants.
Thank you guys very much.